Most people grow vegetables for summer, fresh salads, quick harvests. A few tomatoes for sandwiches, maybe some cucumbers or peppers, and honestly, there is nothing wrong with that. But for most of human history, gardens served a very different purpose. They were survival systems. People depended on crops that could last for months without refrigeration. Vegetables that stored through winter survived food shortages and provided calories long after the growing season ended. Because growing food is only half the battle, storing it matters just as much. Modern grocery stores made most people forget that. Today, if something runs out, we simply drive to another store. But one bad harvest, one supply chain issue, or one expensive winter changes how people suddenly think about food security. And that is where storage crops become incredibly valuable. The right vegetables can quietly feed your family for months after harvest with almost no electricity, no freezer space, and very little maintenance. Some store in root cellars, some dry naturally, some become sweeter over time. Others last nearly an entire year if stored correctly. And honestly, there is something deeply satisfying about walking into a cool room in the middle of winter and seeing shelves, baskets, and crates full of food you grew yourself. That feeling changes people. So in this video, we are breaking down the best vegetables for long-term food storage. These are crops chosen for shelf life, calories, resilience, nutrition, and real-world usefulness for self-reliance and backyard food security. And stay until the end because the #1 crop on this list has helped entire civilizations survive harsh winters for centuries. Let's start with one of the easiest storage crops for beginners: onions. Most people underestimate how valuable onions really are. They are not only flavor, they are foundation: soups, stews, sauces, roasted meals, preserved foods. Nearly every serious home-cooked meal starts with onions. And when properly cured, many onion varieties can store for 6 months or longer without refrigeration. That makes them one of the most efficient crops you can grow. Storage onions prefer dry conditions after harvest. Once their tops fall over naturally, they can be pulled and cured in a warm, airy space for several weeks. After curing, the outer layers dry into protective skins that dramatically extend shelf life. And honestly, storing your own onions changes cooking completely. You stop treating them like expensive ingredients and start using them freely because they are always available, which is exactly what self-reliance should feel like: abundance instead of limitation. Garlic. Garlic may be one of the highest value crops any backyard can produce. It stores incredibly well, requires surprisingly little space, and transforms almost every savory meal. Hardneck and softneck garlic varieties both store well, though softneck types usually last longer. Some varieties remain usable for 8 months or more when cured properly. And garlic is remarkably simple to grow. Plant cloves in autumn. Mulch them heavily. Harvest the following summer. That is basically the system. Garlic also has another huge advantage for self-reliance. You replant part of your harvest every year, which means one successful crop can slowly turn into a permanent garlic supply without constantly buying new seed stock. That compounding effect matters enormously in resilient food systems. Potatoes. There is a reason potatoes helped feed entire populations for centuries. Very few crops produce more calories per square foot while storing so effectively. Potatoes are not glamorous, but they are dependable, and dependable food matters. A cool, dark storage space can keep potatoes edible for months. Some varieties last deep into winter and even early spring. That level of food security becomes incredibly valuable during uncertain seasons. Potatoes are also versatile beyond belief. Mashed, roasted, fried, soup, stew, baked, fermented, dried, very few crops adapt to meals as easily, and calorie density matters more than many modern gardeners realize. A garden full of lettuce looks beautiful. A garden full of potatoes feeds people. That distinction becomes extremely important once self-reliance becomes serious. Sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes may be one of the smartest survival crops for warmer climates. They tolerate heat exceptionally well, produce heavily, and store surprisingly long after curing. And nutritionally, they are incredibly valuable. Calories, fiber, vitamin A minerals. One productive patch can generate massive amounts of food from relatively little space. Another huge advantage is propagation. One sweet potato can create many slips, and those slips become future plants. That ability to multiply your planting stock cheaply makes sweet potatoes especially attractive for long-term food independence. And unlike regular potatoes, sweet potatoes actually become sweeter during storage as starches convert gradually into sugars, which makes winter meals feel far less repetitive. Winter squash. Winter squash were practically designed for long-term storage. Pumpkins, butternut squash, Hubbard squash, acorn squash, many varieties store for months naturally without refrigeration. Some even improve in flavor after harvest. The thick outer skin acts like natural armor protecting the inside for incredibly long periods. And winter squash provides something many storage crops lack. Variety, roasted squash, soup, bread, pie, puree, stews. The flavor profile changes meals dramatically during colder months when fresh produce becomes limited. Another major advantage is reliability. Squash plants often produce heavily, especially in fertile soil. A few healthy vines can generate huge amounts of calorie-dense food surprisingly quickly. And honestly, shelves lined with winter squash feel deeply comforting during winter. Almost primal, like seeing physical proof that your household prepared correctly. Carrots. Carrots become sweeter during cold weather, which already makes them valuable. But their storage ability is what truly matters. In proper conditions, carrots can remain edible for months. Historically, many families stored carrots directly in sand or root cellars throughout winter. And unlike highly processed foods, carrots provide real nutrition during storage season. Fiber, vitamins, minerals, that matters because survival is not only about calories, nutrition matters too. Carrots are also incredibly versatile: fresh eating, roasting, soup, fermentation, juice, stews. And if left in the ground under mulch in some climates, they can effectively become living storage systems. That concept changes gardening completely. Instead of harvesting everything immediately, the garden itself becomes part of the storage strategy. Beets. Beets are one of the most underrated storage vegetables. They tolerate cold weather well, store for months, and provide both edible roots and edible greens. That dual-purpose production makes them incredibly efficient. Beets also preserve beautifully through pickling and fermentation. And nutritionally, they remain valuable during winter when many fresh vegetables disappear. Some people dislike beets because they only experienced canned supermarket versions. Fresh homegrown beets are completely different, sweeter, richer, more complex, and once properly stored, they become one of the most dependable winter vegetables you can grow. Cabbage. Cabbage may not sound exciting, but historically it played a massive role in survival food systems, and for good reason. It stores well naturally, tolerates cold weather, and becomes even more valuable through fermentation. Sauerkraut alone helped people survive winters for generations because fermentation preserved nutrients for months. That long shelf life mattered enormously before refrigeration existed. And honestly, fermentation may be one of the most overlooked self-reliance skills today, because preserved vegetables dramatically extend the usefulness of harvest season. Cabbage also produces impressive amounts of food from relatively small spaces. and cold weather often improves flavor significantly. Dry beans. Dry beans are one of the ultimate long-term storage foods: protein, calories, fiber, shelf stability. When fully dried and stored properly, beans can remain usable for years, not months, years. That level of storage life is almost unmatched in gardening. And unlike many crops, beans improve soil naturally by fixing nitrogen, which means they actively support future harvests too. Pole beans also maximize vertical growing space extremely efficiently, and once dried, beans become incredibly compact compared to fresh vegetables. A relatively small garden can store enormous amounts of nutrition in surprisingly little space. Corn. Most people think of sweet corn first. But for self-reliance, dent corn and flour corn become much more interesting. These varieties dry naturally and store for extremely long periods. Historically, dried corn fed civilizations because it provided reliable calories that could survive difficult seasons. Cornmeal, polenta, animal feed, flour. The versatility becomes extremely valuable, and properly dried corn stores remarkably well when protected from moisture. Which brings us to the most important lesson in this entire video. Storage matters just as much as production. A productive garden without storage knowledge still creates waste, but a garden built around long-term crops changes how your household functions. You stop thinking only about this week. You start thinking seasonally, long-term, strategically. And honestly, that mindset shift may be one of the most valuable parts of self-reliance. Now here is the important part most beginners miss. Do not try growing everything immediately. Start with a few dependable storage crops first. Potatoes, garlic, onions, squash. Learn curing. Learn storage conditions. Learn what your family actually eats regularly. Then expand gradually, because realistic systems survive longer than overwhelming ones. And over time, your pantry slowly transforms: crates of potatoes, braided garlic, shelves of squash, jars of preserved food. That transformation feels incredibly rewarding because it represents something deeper than gardening: preparedness, resilience, capability, the ability to provide for yourself a little more every season. And honestly, that feeling is becoming more valuable every single year. So here is your challenge. Choose one long-term storage crop and plant it this season. Not someday, this season. Because the strongest food systems are built gradually, one harvest at a time. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.